So I'm trying to think out loud about some things that I've been writing about, and I'll see if I can help get these thoughts into order. Um, so I guess the thing that I maybe was trying to think about today was intuition and mm, the relationship between intuition and uh, synchronicity as experiences. Because I had this sense that maybe both are the same thing but experienced in two different ways. So, for instance, if if you have an intuition of something, especially an intuition of something that you couldn't have known, right, according to the general sort of laws of physics, then mm, that intuition, well, you know, you can explain it in many different ways, right? And we do. So, for instance, things like remote viewing, right, where you can have an intuition where you sort of know something that's happening somewhere else, or something that happened at a different time, or that's going to happen in the future. These sorts of intuitions where suddenly information about events in spaces and times that are different to the one that this body is in are yeah, intuitions in which you're consciously kind of, something is coming into your mind, right? Yeah, something's coming into your mind. I guess that's how I would define it. So it's not emerging in the physical environment you're in right now. It's emerging in your mind, and then you will gain insight into it in the physical world in the future when that intuition takes place, or in a different place where when suddenly you get kind of confirmation that this thing that had come into your head actually happened somewhere else, or whatever, confirmation, whatever word you want to use. So that sort of intuition, you can explain in many ways, right? And we do. And obviously, uh, I must admit I haven't read a lot of the literature on this topic. I would love to. I know there is a lot of literature on this topic, so I'm sure there's been a lot of speculation about different models. But I guess one of them could have been something like that you it's something that you're doing, that you're accessing some sort of information somewhere else, right? That somehow the tentacles of your senses, sight, smell, everything, in some weird way, extend beyond the body. So you're able to see and feel things that are in different places and times. So I guess that's just one kind of, I guess, intuitive way that we explain these things. But I get the feeling sometimes with this stuff that what's happening is that you yourself are becoming the things that you're intuiting, and therefore somehow identifying with them. And because you're identifying with them, you're able to know what state they're in and what state they're tending towards. So, for instance, I was thinking earlier of the example of having the intuition that that something is going to break, and that something is going to break in a way that's unexpected, perhaps. Like if there's a post or some sort of a sign on the street, on a post, like a stop sign or something, right? And maybe tomorrow a huge vehicle crashes into it and breaks it. That's an event that you couldn't have known. in theory, right? But imagine you have an intuition of that a few days before. You have a dream of your street and a car crashing into that thing and breaking it. It see it's maybe good to compare that sort of intuition to a slightly more commonly accepted and commonly kind of spoken about form of intuition, which would be an intuition of something that's going to break, but something that's going to break that theoretically you could have known was going to break. So, for example, maybe there is some wooden object in your house that's about to break. Maybe, I don't know, a little part of your ceiling or something. If you have like a wooden ceiling and you just have the sense that it's about to break, and just snap. Well, one way that we could explain that and incorporate it into the sort of ways in which we understand physics today is to say that, sure, your sight, sound, and all that does have a wider range than we think, in that we can, for example, smell things that we're not consciously aware of, or we can hear things that we're not consciously aware of, but that don't actually extend beyond space and time, right? It's just that, maybe you already could, register in the back of your mind a slight creaking of the ceiling, right? And you just weren't consciously paying attention to it. Maybe you were sort of smelling a certain dampness of damp, rotten wood, and you weren't registering it, right? You could explain it in these sort of terms, that your senses were indeed extending. They were extended. They went further than you thought consciously, but you just weren't aware of it. So, unconsciously, you come up with this intuition that says, I think that the wood's about to break, and it does, right? And then you can say, okay, so that's on the fringe of what we would call acceptable according to science, right? That somehow you had this sense that was acquired through like empiricism. You were perceiving all these things about the wood that was about to break, and they were things that could have been perceived. If a team of scientists had come and looked at your ceiling, they would have seen that the wood was rotting, it was about to break. So I think that something similar is sort of happening with intuitions that go beyond time and the time and space that you're in when you're having the intuition. Something similar is happening, but different. So, in what ways is it similar? Well, in that somehow I think you can also smell like in the case of that, it's not a great example, but the example of like a stop sign on the street and a big van or something crashes into it and breaks it. You could have all these senses of like I'm seeing things that I'm not consciously aware of. I'm smelling things that I'm not consciously aware of. I'm tasting things that I'm not consciously aware of. But from the perspective of the materials themselves, so that you are somehow you're identifying with the post snapping. You can feel the snapping. You can identify with the van driving into it. Because of this identification, a mental image is created. Like, it could be a dream, it could be a vision, something like that. It could appear into your artwork or something. It gets transformed into an image, and because it gets transformed into an image, it feels as if you're seeing that image from the outside. Like it's you, observer, who are observing this image, this little movie. But I think that it's the kind of movie that you would have in dreams. You know, you can dream of yourself walking down the street, right? And then you can wake up and you can remember that little movie. But you didn't see yourself in the third person walking down the street, right? You were that person walking down the street. It's just that in retrospect, it gets kind of absorbed as a third person memory. You're looking at it. Again, this is just pure speculation based on intuition, basically, because I feel that subjectively it feels similar. The same that the way in which we remember dreams seems similar to the way in which you remember intuitive kind of events that then take place later. It feels similar in this sense that, in when you remember a dream, you remember yourself feeling all these things. You remember yourself maybe feeling this dread, or maybe if you may even dream that someone's slitting your throat or something, and you feel that, and you remember that, but you remember it as a third person little movie that you can look at. So it feels sort of similar, the intensity of the emotion, that you can feel the post breaking. You can feel the van crashing into it. I always struggled to think what was the difference between intuitive sort of dreams that you kind of get this weird sense that they're going to happen, and dreams where that wasn't happening. And I think that at least a first speculative step that I would like to take here is that in intuitive dreams of that sort, the intensity of the experience is due to the identification with the events. You're identifying with the things that are happening. You're identifying with the post breaking. You're identifying with the van. And of course, that's a whole kind of trip in itself, because you're identifying with inert matter. Basically, you're identifying with the snapping of something, right? Because at some level, we can identify with the snapping of wood, and that's what sort of poetry is, in a sense, right? We're able to compare very different sorts of events and states. You know, we can look at a burning flame and kind of, identify our thoughts with it. We think, oh, my that flame is burning in the same way that my thoughts are burning, or something, and feel this identification, and then you write a poem about it. But there is something there, I feel, that it's the thing with intuition, I think, is that it kind of proposes that the identification of your thoughts with the flame is not just a one-way identification. It's not the case that, oh, my thoughts are like the flame. Or, no, sorry, the other way around. It's not that the flame is like my thoughts, which is what we would usually say. We would say, in a comparison of that type, the primordial matter that we're using for the comparison is our kind of observations and our states. So we say, oh, the flame is like an emotion. I think that intuition sort of suggests that it goes both ways, that emotion is also like a flame. And that therefore there is something about emotion and thought that is material in some way, that it has the dynamics that are similar to those of wood breaking, water flowing, fire kind of burning or ascending, and obviously the infinite kind of variety of things that can take place in what we would call inert matter and inert sort of nature. So of course that's a thing that I think we need to kind of think about, because if these experiences are real, then what is the similarity between thought and inert matter? What does inertness mean in that context? And obviously, what does sentience mean in that context? Like, both kind of get compromised in a way. And so, of course, that's all just speculation again, but it's speculation, I think, based on well, first, just this sense that the kind of theories that I've often heard are the kind of theories where it's you and your tentacles extending beyond the reaches of space and time. But I think that if we're talking about if there is a component of identification, then it's not just me, right? It's not just that I am becoming aware of the wood snapping. It's that I am becoming the wood snapping. And if I am becoming the wood snapping, then which I are we talking about? Because if I am the wood snapping, then the wood snapping isn't subordinated to me as in this body, this person, right? I am the wood snapping independently of me at some point. And so, is it really, to what extent is it an intuition that I am having? And to what extent isn't it an intuition that the wood is having? And that somehow is being able to be articulated through people. So at least that's, the nature of this speculation, I think, is just to open up the possibility that I think if we're going to talk about these experiences, then this seems to me as likely a possibility as saying that it all comes from us. And also, of course, based on the idea that these experiences are real, right? And that therefore the speculation about them isn't being born from an attempt to prove them. I think it's a step beyond. I think we need to start from the position of the experience and then talk about it. And I think it's important also because it feels to me that a lot of mental health issues surrounding this sort of stuff, so obviously, schizophrenia and related kind of forms of mental and emotional suffering, seem due to like an over-identification with the results of these sorts of experiences, right? So if you are constantly identifying with locations, right, coordinates in space and time that are beyond the ones in which this body finds itself, if your strategy for dealing with that is to incorporate all of that into your location in space and time and subordinate it all into here, then it's going to get very inflated, right? You're going to start thinking that this specific location in space and time, are bigger than other places, or weird sort of maneuvers are going to happen that are weird in the sense that they are antisocial, I'm tempted to say, right? They make it difficult for they make solidarity difficult, or they make sort of it difficult for people to interact in a way that is caring and that is caring, right, towards yourself and towards others, right? So I think that in a weird way, it's in a weird way, in order to preserve, in a sense, the integrity of the ego, an ego dissolution needs to take place. That is to say that somehow if this experience is real, you need to think of models that explain it in ways that incorporate multiple identification, right? An identification that goes beyond the I as associated with this body. And of course, I think that the problem here and the reason why things like schizophrenia tend towards this model is because this is the model that we're offering ourselves, right? Culturally, this is the model that we offer. We offer the model that everything gets reduced down into here, right? Everything gets reduced down into here, so that anything that happens in your field of experience, we tell ourselves is necessarily linked to here. And I think the problem is that if you really drill this perspective down, then any experience that extends beyond that and that doesn't really work with that is forcibly made to work in a way that makes the ego incapable of interacting with society. So anyway, yeah, so just some thoughts on this. Thanks.